Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Management, a VUCA perspective, and we are discussing core concepts. We've already discussed the preliminary conversation about segmentation and targeting, and now we are going to get further into the subject matter. I am your friend and guide on this amazing journey, Siddhi Prad Bhattacharya. Welcome to module number 2. Now, in the words of Donald A. Norman, who's director, Design Lab, UCSD, a foremost marketing thinking mind and a design thinker at heart, he says market segmentation is actually a natural result of the vast differences amongst people. You and I, we are different. We look different, we see things differently, we consume things differently, and what we make an opinion of things is also different. Even if it differs by even the slightest of whiskers, we have a differentiation even amongst ourselves. Even twins, for that matter, have different destinies, different lives, and different outcomes. So, hence, every individual has their own unique story, their own unique journey, and hence, the way marketers approach each of these audiences is singularly differentiated, which therefore helps people to create clusters of people with similar experiences who can be spoken with in a certain way. And then you have the differentiated other segments which have a different story or narrative. So, both these things kept in mind is what helps us define market segmentation and use it as we go forward. Now, what is the kind of audience that is right for you as an organization? You need to start with spotting them. So, that is typically the entire task of targeting once you've done segmentation. So, segmentation helps you find those specific correct audiences that are most likely to engage with what you are doing, with what your products are, with what your thinking is, what your belief systems are, what values you stand for. So, all of these things help them define how they align with you. So, these are aspects of getting into the segmentation exercise. Here, we are looking at customer and market segments and a few case studies which will give you a nice meaty exposure to this entire thought process. So, if you are to navigate customer and business market segments, what you need to do is you need to first understand that they are broadly classified into these two customer and business market segments, and each operates in its own individual unique way. Customer markets, to begin with, they focus on individual buyers. Yes, they may be clustered into groups finally, but at the unitary level, these are individual buyers who are influenced by lifestyle, what their emotions drive them towards, what their personal needs are when they are consuming something. And business markets, on the other hand, they cater to organizations. Organizations have a structure, they have a format, they have a certain kind of way of working, and typically they are more logic driven, they prioritize efficiency, they always seek value to be derived and are constantly keeping a keen eye out there on returns on investment, efficiency, effectiveness. So, hence, segmentation and targeting as processes are crucial for both, but follow distinct approaches when it comes to customer markets vis-a-vis business markets. Customer markets in this case use demographic, psychographic, behavioral, and geographic segmentation. We've discussed and covered some of these in the previous module. And business markets, on the other hand, they focus on what kind of industry, the type of industry, the company size, whether they can actually fulfill the demand that a particular supply has to cover. And then what are their decision making structures? Will they do the necessary things in time? Will we get our input items on time? And what the particular purchasing behavior of that organization is, which is ending up buying it. So there are a couple of case studies which we'll cover here. One is Superdry's customer market strategy. Superdry segments its audiences by age, fashion preferences, and lifestyle choices, targets young, trend conscious consumers, and through a fusion of Japanese inspired graphics and British tailoring, the brand has cultivated a very strong identity and loyal following. On the other hand, we've got Chase Sapphire, which is part of Chase Bank, and they segment professionals and high net worth individuals who value premium travel and lifestyle benefits and offer exclusive rewards, travel perks, and superior customer service. And this attracts business travelers and affluent consumers alike. So these cases are going to be covered in today's conversation, and that sets about broadly what today's module is all about. Now, when we look at these case studies, we have to first understand what consumer markets and business markets look like, and let's dive straight into consumer markets. Now here, you need to understand how market segmentation works and how it divides consumers based on common traits. So at the unitary level, you have one particular consumer, but when you are adding more of the same, you are creating a whole audience, a whole community of that particular kind of consumer. So basis that, you're going to have certain tenets. We've discussed these in the previous conversation as well, but just to recap, you have segmentation types based on demographics. Demographics define what age are they, what gender are they, what kind of money are they making. So all of these factors, they define the demographics. There are more obviously, but certain few examples are given here for your understanding. Then there is geography. So which region do they hail from? If they are from a city, what size of that city in terms of population holds today? Then there are certain behavioral trends and patterns. So what kind of usages do they actually exhibit? And what kind of brand loyalty do they exhibit? So these things define how likely are they to buy your product, what has been the precedence in this particular scenario, and what are other factors that motivate, which come from the psychographic aspects, which define what kind of lifestyles they lead and what kind of values they hold dear. Remember that at the end of the day, all marketing is towards providing a solution towards a fear or a desire. And when you're able to define this, and we'll be speaking of this incessantly as we go along, you'll find this to be something which we cluster as an insight. This gives you an internal understanding inside probably the hearts and minds of the consumers. Consumers at times don't even know that this is their inherent fear or desire. They at times aren't able to express these things. So this will stay core to marketing throughout, and because it's core to human behavior also. So hence this will be something which we continuously probe into and keep trying and finding out about. So let's look at demographic segmentation first. Here you have different generations also. You can classify people as per the generations that they belong to. Why is this important? Because generations typically have a certain way of life and a certain exposure level and a certain comfort with things that have happened in their lives and have shaped their lives and destinies. So they operate in a one particular way. That's the general case scenario. So you have a silent generation, which was typically 25 to 45. The people born in that particular couple of decades would exhibit a strong, silent kind of demeanor, and they would not really be very vocal about things. They would soldier on under any given circumstance, and they would try and make the best of what life has to offer. The next would be baby boomers. These were born between 46 and 64 of the previous century. Why boomers? Because at that point in time, the economy, especially in the Western world, to be very, very precise, the United States, they had an economic upturn. That economic upturn meant better lifestyle, meant better capabilities for people to live in, and life overall and the facilities which were provided by said life were booming for these people. So hence, babies who were born in that particular space were baby boomers. Post which you've got Gen X from 1965 to 1981. These are Generation X. These were better than the earlier ones in terms of the exposure. Technology was coming in a big way. They experienced a lot of the initial shifts when it came to technology, and they were the first generation which wanted that particular experience to fall into the midst of their everyday life. Post which came millennials. Till today, millennials are the most important generation because they are the ones who have seen the maximum transitions. So they've seen that particular transition in tech. They were, in fact, from a generation which was capable of making the shift. They have embraced that particular shift in their own lifestyles, and they are hungry go-getters. So hence they also want to spend and get all the material benefits within their lives. Gen Z from 2001 to present, and now you've also got Gen Alpha. And in fact, some people are even talking about Gen Beta, which is the most current set. So different lifestyles, different thought processes, different mindsets, they evolve over time, and age helps you generally make a cluster of these as we go along. Now, for example, if a brand called Centrum Multivitamins is there, it will offer different products for different age groups. In terms of life cycle and life stage segmentation, you will also want to see where that particular person has actually reached in their life. So this age-based segmentation helps you track the life cycle of that individual and what kind of life stage are they at. Important life stages like events, like marriage, purchasing a home, becoming parents. These are important life stages when a lot of purchases are made, a lot of decisions are made, and a lot of fear or desire tends to creep in. Behavioral trends also shift during that particular stage because your thought process, your intent, your priorities, they change. All of these things define what and where you are in terms of life stage. Newlywed kits from Procter & Gamble and Clorox address that particular segment like marriage. Singles Day promotions in China actually looked at life stages when people have reached a certain age, are yet unmarried, and hence for them you are creating an activity which is promotions led and therefore pushes the kind of materialistic purchasing and things like that, which got them to buy more because they needed to fulfill their own desires. Now, in terms of gender, what can you do? You can look at traditional gender roles which are there. They influence the kind of buying behavior which is shown. So, for example, Avon, it has women's beauty products. Why does it focus on that? Because women typically buy their products. Their beauty products help them enhance their outward appeal. The outwardly appeal is something which therefore helps women feel better about themselves, and Avon actually helps them overcome that particular fear of not looking great or the desire to look better. It's two insights molded into one, and therefore Avon helps push that particular thought process by aiding their outwardly beauty through their products. Similarly, for women again, Gillette Venus helps them look attractive by providing them women's razors. Now, There are certain gender neutral products also which are coming out, and some brands have actually made it well because of that. Bic, for example, has made for you razors which fit the bill whether you are a man or a woman. And Aesop and Malinguet's skincare is something which appeals to you when you want good, soft, nourished skin. And so, therefore, it appeals to both men and women who are metrosexual in their approach, and so therefore they want to look that particular part. So these things are gender neutral products, and brands have also actually gained some amount of success through that kind of segmentation. In terms of geography, the distances, the locations, the kind of density of population, these are factors which also define the consumption and behavioral patterns of certain people and certain audiences, and hence it also helps divide markets based on where they are. So you can get national level campaigns, you can get state level campaigns, you can get city and neighborhood level campaigns of particular brands and products. So the moment this starts to happen, you're able to look at that particular segment of geography as one large or small unit, and are able to fine tune what your appeal is basis that particular audience segment. It helps marketers tailor their marketing to localized preferences and needs which people exhibit in that particular geography. Online platforms typically expand their reach to specific geographic areas because, yes, once you've sold, you have to also follow up with the logistics because you have to deliver the products. So hence, you are going to be available and appeal, at least in terms of messaging, to those audiences where your logistics can take care of the last mile delivery. For example, there is Yelp. Yelp connects users with local businesses through reviews, and it does at a very, very city level, experiment level engagement. And here they have got a mobile app. That app drives an engagement and also gets the ad revenue going because people who advertise on Yelp are looking at the localized presence, and therefore they are trying to gain localized support for their business through the ads they run. And local businesses benefit because they get increased visibility and it brings more and more people to their doorstep. Now, why are regional differences so important? India specifically as a country where food changes every 200 kilometers and the dialect changes every 350, 400 kilometers, is a space where this is the most relevant possibly amongst all developing nations in the world, and consumer preferences vary by location. For example, in Salt Lake City, there is the highest consumption of Jello. So Jello consumption is highest at Salt Lake City. Now in Long Beach, California, you got highest ice cream consumption. New York has top buyers of country music CDs. Obviously, with the advent of streaming music, this has changed. But at that point in time, CDs, when they ruled the roost, New York used to have the maximum number of CD purchases. The companies are using mapping software to pinpoint who the high value customers are. This is where data and analytics, they become the next level tool for marketers. And on top of this, you've got nowadays AI and machine learning, which automates the process, which ensures no data point is missed, and you're able to track more than one kind of feature within the consumer behavior, and are therefore able to map what can predict the next particular purchase cycle. Prism Perimeter, for example, they have used a geoclustering tool combining both geographic and demographic data, and are able to pinpoint how their consumers are working, and they in fact have identified 68 unique customer segments, and they are able to individually tailor their communication to each of these targeted areas, targeted audiences, so that their marketing actually gets them the right kind of output, the right kind of ROI at the end of the spend that they have incurred. Now, in terms of behavioral segmentation, you need to understand that people have certain actions which are driven by stimuli, and they have certain usage formats, so usage patterns which you can track over time. So, divide of customers happens on these lines of what kind of actions do they exhibit and what kind of usage patterns do they showcase. So there are various key categories you can look at. Users ka status. User status is non-users, people who have not actually come up and used that particular product or service. Potential users who may fall into the funnel. First time users, people who are just dabbling or experimenting with it. Regular users, people who have been going on with it, and ex users who have used but say no thank you anymore. So that way you are able to find out what the kind of status is for specific users or specific categories of them. Then you've got usage rate. What kind of rate is their usage? So is it light, is it medium, is it heavy? How frequently do they buy, how frequently do they consume? This defines the usage rate. Then you've got buyer readiness stage. So this is typically your IDA model, where you start with awareness, then you've got interest, and then you've got desire, and then you've got action or purchase. This is one of the most fundamental and most basic communication formats for marketers, and it's tried and tested the world over. This is something just works. So this is something which marketers will swear by. In terms of all of these steps, there is one last step, which is loyalty. So here you actually see if people have fallen to this particular behavioral segment, and you see hardcore loyal, split loyal, shifting loyalty, and switchers kind of audiences. So hardcore loyals are people who will go with that particular brand and none other. They will wait. They will not buy anything, come what may. Then there are split loyals who may have preferences for 2-3 alternatives, and they keep splitting their purchases between these. Then there are shifting loyals who move from one to the other, but then at times may come back also. And then there are complete switchers, people who have moved out of that particular segment. And there are various occasions which demand the purchase of that particular product or service, and therefore different needs arise when they are based on events or the kind of timing where they are communicated with. Events we've already spoken of, and timing is specifically how far prior to the decision and execution of that decision is when you will be actually speaking with them. So in terms of behavioral segmentation, you must see that marketing adapts to different consumer knowledge levels. Awareness, if it is aware, then interest. If they're interested, then you create desire, and finally you get them to act on it. So IDA model always goes hand in glove with this particular part. And then you've got promoting pap tests, for example, which gives you an indication of cervical cancer and how to detect it. So pap tests were used in this particular sense, and this was used to adapt to different consumer knowledge levels. What is a pap test? I don't know. Okay, this is what a pap test, it's a swab. That swab is done in your intimate area. Why is it required? Because if the pap test comes out positive, then you have a high risk of cervical cancer, which can therefore be prevented. So all of these things help the health providers better prepare for those scenarios for a lot of people. So there is awareness as a stage. Simple ads introduced that particular concept, told them what cervical cancer is, how pap tests manage it. Then interest and desire were coaxed, where you show the benefits of doing that particular exercise and the risks of what if you don't, and then you end up one fine day with cervical cancer, which you can't manage then. And finally push them into action, where you've got free checkups, and it also encourages adoption. So actions like these helps the decision to be taken and people to actually walk that particular path. Then there is psychographic segmentation. Now within psychographics, you are giving groups of customers a certain kind of segmentation, where you look at their personality, who are they, what kind of styling do they exhibit, what lifestyle values do they also possess, what values do they swear by, and any other psychological traits which they may exhibit from time to time. Now, for example, Honda Element, it targeted young consumers and attracted baby boomers. Why was this happening? Because the baby boomers who felt that they wanted to relive their particular childhood or their young years were the ones who actually opted for it. Although the positioning was like showing the consumer as a young person. Baby boomers wanted to relive those days and hence they opted for it. And it led to product misalignment and eventually it got discontinued because the connect was not fitting. They wanted the right kind of audience. Baby boomers were on their way out. So there was not much sustainability which could have happened. Now there is a VALS framework which is going to help you find that particular structure, and there you find that the value added segments are to be found, where segments are based on customer motivation and resources. So there are certain ones which are ideals driven. So they seek knowledge, they seek principles. That's the kind of audience here. Some are driven by achievements. So what kind of status do I get in life? How much success have I achieved in life? And then there are certain ones which are self-expression driven. So they like a life of adventure and the kind of experiences which come from adventure. So value-added segmentation frameworks like VALS will help you define audiences and also look into what psychographic traits they showcase. Now, when you cut it down to a very, very niche segment, for example, you look at the LGBT market. There 7% of the population and they have $917 billion in terms of purchasing power. So that is typically how the audience is, the segment is, the niche is. And 75% of them prefer brands that actually support the LGBT communities because they feel included. Here, a lot of brands have done initiatives. American Airlines is one. Rainbow Team is something they did, and they did LGBT travel services to ensure that this particular niche actually found favor with them. Brands like Nike, AT&T, Target, they had inclusive marketing campaigns to normalize the particular kind of societal viewing of the LGBTQ community. And so that's why they found favor with that particular niche audience. Pepsi and Campbell also continued their LGBT advertising despite facing boycotts from regular users. Some of them were too conservative to take these ideas on. The conscious choice here was Pepsi, Campbell, etc. They felt that if we supported this particular audience, this audience would give me a lot of value in terms of monetary purchases and what have you. And that outweighed whatever negative bounce was coming from the people boycotting. So this is how you look at consumer segments. There are various other nuances to it, but this broadly exposes you to those nuances, to those various textures that you need to understand. Now, when it comes to segmenting business markets, the rule of the game changes a bit. Here, business markets can be segmented using similar variables as consumer markets, but there are certain additional factors. For example, demographics is there. Here you look at the industry, the company size, the location of those particular businesses. In terms of operating variables, you will look at the kind of technology that they use, the user status and the customer capabilities that are there. These things will help you define how are they prospects, are they non-users, are they currently users, regular users, little bit have they used. All of those aspects are found out in the user status. Customer capabilities wise, are they small, are they large, do they have plans of expansion, all those aspects come into play here. Now, in terms of the purchasing approach, you will also see the buying function. So, how do they go about making those corporate purchases? Then, what is the power structure? Who are the decision makers in the organization who will finally sign on the check that allows for that particular purchase? And what is the relationship status with the provider? So, is the provider a vendor of continuous repute, or is it something where a new item is being put out in front? There are other situational factors as well. For example, is there a dying need, hence urgency for the organization to actually participate in the purchasing process? Are they going to apply it immediately, and do they have a certain kind of order size? A smaller order size, A smaller ticket size therefore may actually prompt them to buy sooner, but a larger order size will require a lot more scrutiny, and hence it will ask them to go back to the discussion table once more. Then there are personal characteristics. For example, how similar are the offerings to other competitive products? What is the risk attitude of the organization which is buying into your product or service, and do they exhibit some sort of customer loyalty towards brands that they have worked with? So, all of these factors, they actually help structure the understanding of business markets and how to go about looking at these. They help identify profitable sectors and also who are the high value customers in these particular segments. It allows businesses to actually tailor their products, get the pricing right, and also come up with better marketing strategies going further. This helps focus the resources on segments which actually define with growth potential, because the value for the effort that is put in for the marketing team is something which has to keep going higher and higher, leading to profitability. So, for example, here's one case study, Timken, for example. Here they had a challenge where their profits were declining and the shareholder returns were also going down. What they did as a solution was they conducted a market study to identify which particular sectors are profitable. They shifted their focus from the auto industry, they used to manufacture ball bearings, parts, sprockets and such like, to heavy processing, aerospace and defense. Why was this shift enacted? Because these industries were suddenly exhibiting a high amount of demand, and that demand could have been sustained. Also, the core competency of making machine parts was something which Timken knew. All they had to do was realign their assembly line, and that is typically where they started. They also adjusted their pricing strategy based on the customer profitability. How much does the customer gain from it? Accordingly, we will be pricing, and so therefore they will also have lesser problems to tend with when it came to working with them as a vendor. What was the outcome? All of these things actually helped them record revenue growth, and despite a recession, this was post COVID and post the European downturn economically. So hence all of these factors came into play and helped Timken move with surer footsteps in a world where everything was shaken up. Again, you have to remember that these steps have to be kept in mind, keeping the VUCA animal in the room in consideration. Shifts and changes will have to be addressed. You will have to ensure that you have better processes to address those particular challenges as they come. Superdry, one of the brands we were discussing, it is a global fashion brand, and this was formed in 2003 by Julian Dunkerton and James Holder in the UK. Superdry, it fuses American vintage fashion, Japanese graphics and British quality. So they have actually talked about these three things in various ways. American vintage fashion defines the cut and the kind of form factor of the garb. Japanese graphics give it a certain creative look and feel, make it contemporary. The colors, the dash, the splash of the elements gives Superdry a certain unique look, and British quality in terms of the fit of that particular piece of clothing. So all of these things together, they formed something which is differentiable and formidable at the same point in time. They started with 5 t-shirts and now they have 500 plus branded stores worldwide. So this is the power of creating a differentiated offering which appeals to a certain kind of segment, and they help push you so much that you end up with astounding results like that. Now, what did Superdry do? They defined the unique identity very, very clearly. They took up key elements. They said we will work only with premium fabrics, hand-drawn graphics, and washed out yet modern designs to make them look vintage. Here, they also used celebrity endorsements to the best of their abilities. They got David Beckham, Justin Bieber, Kate Winslet, and such like to actually showcase what kind of influencers actually pushed their product forward. It created finally a strong brand appeal among younger consumers who were looking for that differentiated niche kind of offering, and so therefore they thronged at Superdry's stores. In terms of marketing mix, what they did was they advertised their particular products. In terms of digital marketing, they created a content story and kept continuously pushing their items up there. And they also worked on sponsorships. Through sponsorships, whether they sponsored, they got events like Superdry Sound, which was a summer music festival, and it was created so that the audience could get a chance to experience the brand, experience the entire offering. And in 2015, they also did a collaboration with Idris Elba for a premium collection. Why Idris Elba? Because he is one of the most celebrated British origin actors in Hollywood, and therefore it helped them get a particular premium collection out there, because Idris Elba is seen as the suave gentleman, and that is the value it projects, and that value was something which the brand also wanted to embody. Now in 2018, you've got 1.8 billion annual sales coming, and you've got online presence in, very simply, more than 150 countries. So these are crazy numbers, and that is typically what the success of Superdry helped them achieve. Now also going further, they educated the customer with YouTube campaigns, where they boosted the kind of engagements that they were doing and the sales that they achieved out of things. For example, they had this winter campaign saying, "This is the jacket." So hence, it was defined that they and nobody else knew how to provide the best looking yet functionally correct winter jacket. So that is how they positioned themselves. Similarly, in 2019, when the slowdown happened in sales, the economic downturn, they reduced the brand's relevance, and the brand therefore focused its shift to social engagement and influencer marketing, because that was pushing people to experience the brand, the products, etc., walk into a store, maybe order online. So the influencers and social engagement aspects helped push that particular brand in a growth direction. When they moved into the digital space, in terms of growth, they found that on Instagram, they competed with brands like Hollister, which is established on Instagram. So they also made moves in TikTok expansion in 2019. They invited Australian TikTok influencers, and they got 300 plus attendees at a store opening with really not much that they had to try. They also ran a Christmas campaign, "One for me, one for you," which was celebrating the entire spirit of Christmas. And in the entire effort, they got 2.8 million organic search before their product launched. And this was part PR through whatever we did. So that enhanced interactive engagement and increased the store visits and purchases for Superdry. All of these aspects, if you notice, were towards creating more opportunities for the consumer to experience the brand and also feel part of that particular community. And these exercises, what the brand put into play, were all things which helped them push that envelope in that direction. Now we come to the other kind of case study that we have. This is from Chase Manhattan Bank, and Chase Sapphire is that particular Visa based card which they were promoting. And this is a premium credit card. So why premium credit card? Because this is aimed at a certain kind of audience and not less. So Chase Bank is a subsidiary of JP Morgan Chase, and 93 million plus card holders are on the roster. 5,000 plus branches exist, and they are known for their high customer satisfaction. So which means that people who bought from Chase, they were very, very highly elated with the services that they received from them. So in 2006, Chase conducted market research to refine their credit card operations. With that market research, they exhibited the fact that the first thing is to understand what is going on and where can I actually affect the conversation for the better. So they identified the audience, which was affluent consumers. Why affluent consumers? Because they wanted two things. One, they wanted people who would use the card to begin with, and B, once they had incurred certain costs, they would be in a position to pay it back as well. The bank thinks that money returned after the transaction is where the loan has actually succeeded. So these are things that they have discussed with consumers. In terms of returns, 15% of the cardholders, and they actually found that this was particularly a great demographic to work with. And 50% of the spending, of the total marketing spending, was aimed at that particular 15% of the entire cardholders group. In 2009, what they did was they introduced 5 credit card sub-brands, including Chase Sapphire. So this is typically how it worked out for them in the longer run. Now, while they were actually targeting the customers, they actually followed and tracked competition and found that particular set of customers who were affluent, and hence they competed directly with Amex Platinum, which is American Express. The key features which they added into their particular offering was no annual fee and 2 times the points on travel and 1 times elsewhere. So cashback is something which cards work very, very heavily with and rely on also apparently very heavily. And here these rewards promote the usage of the card, and therefore the ultimate rewards redemption platform is something which the consumers gravitated towards, and that is something which Chase also benefited from. They also provided something which was to the tune of live customer service, where there were no automated menus. End of the day, if you try and interact with an IVR, you are stuck by the capability of the IVR to deliver, and at times technical glitches happen. You are not able to reach a human being at the end of the voice, and hence it tends to put you off. Those things were taken care of by Chase, who actually got people, human beings, to interact with them, and that helped define the entire experience for the audience and therefore the benefits for Chase. What did this result in? They got 90% satisfaction rate and approximately 85% recommendation rate, because they felt that I am gaining from this, I should tell my downline. So a lot more also joined in because of this entire activity. Now, Sapphire Preferred was their card offering, and it decided to expand in 2011. It introduced this particular aspect to gain a larger affluent market share. They raised the cost to 95 annual fee and better reward rates as a result from the same. Also, they gave 50,000 points bonus. This was for spending $4,000 in 3 months, and the metal core design which was there, if you see the metal core design, this gave it unique tactile identity, because you used to touch and feel the card and you could sense that this is something which is different from whatever else is there in the market. So it had a little bit of bling value. Now, when they were looking at their audiences, they targeted a very specific age group, 25 to 44 years old, and in terms of their capabilities to earn, they're looking at people with $150,000 plus salaries, plus any other income that they have, and these people would be travel enthusiasts, people who shift to a certain location for an adventure or travel, what have you. And then $450 annual fee was there, with 3 times the points on travel or dining and exclusive events. So these were reasons and occasions for them to spend, and 100,000 high point launch bonus was given, which created huge amount of demand for the particular product. In terms of social media, they used influencers and used them for marketing instead of traditional ads. So this was the entire way in which they progressed, and that really gives us a fuller understanding of how marketing segmentation has worked in these two scenarios and overall as a complete offering set. Now, it is a critical driver of business success. Marketing segmentation helps you understand who your end consumer is, what are they all about, where are their habits and what do they do on a day-to-day basis, and also to understand how best to offer them something which they can utilize in their current lifestyle. So it is an inward progression from the brand side, trying to invoke whatever is critical inside the consumer's mind, but the response, what they expect is basically customer feedback actually helps them understand how the entire reception of whatever has been thrown at the customer is something that they have either liked or disliked. So both these things coming into play together helps the brands to identify and target the right consumers effectively. Now, the segmentation strategies that we have looked at a variety of these geographies. So it can also give you which particular segmented areas. It can also give you scale from your resident welfare associations to a small location within a city, to the largest city, to a district, to a state level, to the national level, to the country level and global level, South Asian level. You can look at various sets of segmentations by the way you cluster them according to geography. Demographic wise, age, gender, income, a variety of other factors that define who these people are, what they do. Psychographics also helps define what their major internalized thought process and belief systems are. And finally, behavioral, which tells you what are they going to do what next. So all of these factors and much more can be used as important points from which segmentation strategies actually come about. And this helps the companies refine their marketing efforts. You are able to define it basis your decent understanding of the consumer audiences. And this ensures products resonate with those specific distinct consumers. The Superdry, as you saw, it leveraged that particular kind of cultural blending. It got Brit manufacturing and quality, it got Japanese graphics and art, and it got American form factor and design styling. So all of these things were blended into one particular culture, and after doing so, they targeted the branding to build something which was not only going to work in the UK, it was expanding beyond the borders of UK. You even have Superdry stores in India today. So this helped build a global fashion presence, and definitely they were looking to reach out to younger consumers, and which is something they manage also. This happened with vintage American style, Japanese graphics and British craftsmanship, the things that we've already spoken of, and through celebrity endorsements as well. So when this kind of celebrity endorsement starts to happen, people connect with that particular brand and the reason for it to stand tall amongst competition. And here we've got digital marketing, which creates more and more opportunities to see and coax people into buying. And you've got influencer driven campaigns. These people experience the brand, convey it to consumers, and allow for people to get the right kind of interest or desire going. And this happens on platforms like TikTok. So this is one particular place where they actually got a lot of success, but it does also happen on Instagram and various other formats. Superdry expanded their reach through it, and they had to revamp their strategy, but the sales slowed, and they emphasized social engagement as one of the spaces and focused on the youth to market their particular products, and that is how they showed it up. On the other side, Chase Sapphire we've spoken of. applied their particular market research which they had done and strategic differentiation which they brought about, and they actually managed to penetrate the affluent credit card segment, which they took the fight to big players like Amex also. There they started competing with these larger players. Their offering set was different, the reward points that we spoke of were different, and therefore it actually helped more and more people to align with them. So this is typically how it worked. And overall, with lifestyle driven branding, because at the end of the day, when you're flying out or when you are going for a particular leisure stay at a certain location, or whether you worked very, very hard, you are a top level honcho in the company, and now you want to exhibit certain premium perks of having worked that particular way up to that particular job profile, you want those things to be reflected. And the card you carry, that card actually defines how you will be viewed by your next to you kind of flyer. So all these things were looked at when it came to defining how the entire aspect of creating prominent affluent credit cards, segment cards from Chase brought in these particular players. And on top of it, they used influencer marketing. Now, influencers typically had their way of showcasing the lifestyle, the capabilities that that particular audience segment had, and it created the necessary wish and desire within the audience's mind as well. So these aspects were looked at, carefully crafted, and you created a pipeline which, when we spoke of earlier also, if you remember, awareness, interest, desire, action, and definitely now also loyalty. So all these aspects of the IDA model were looked at, and loyalty was tried to be something which was pushed out there. And Chase Sapphire's Reserves 2016 launch redefined the actual category, because until then Amex was the one which was sitting pretty and having to do nothing more than even lift its finger. And this drove massive demand and a 90% renewal rate, which was stupendous for this particular category. And this proved that segmentation backed branding, which actually fosters customer loyalty. You choose the right segment, you work with them, whether working with one or with a plenty, and with that particular approach, you're able to create the necessary drive, the necessary demand, the necessary aspects of why a consumer segment will sign and side with that particular brand as such. So all of these things together give you a lot of belief in market segmentation. And we've obviously looked at two various different lines. One is the consumer and one is the business side of things. So both aspects need to be looked at. There are similarities, but you are able to define one very well versus the other and define how these particular audiences will react individually to communication at a larger stage. Now, all of these things together will take us closer towards positioning, which is what we will discuss further. But when we discuss positioning, we have to also understand how value propositions are created. What is typically the core of making the customer feel nice about putting something in front of them for which they have to pay up money? The customer should feel that they have been charged fairly and not wrongly. That is when the value proposition really starts to work in the mind of the consumer, and they feel that this was money well spent. So more on that in the upcoming session when we take up how value propositions are to be crafted and created. I look forward to you discussing this with me as we go into the next conversation. Until then, I am signing out.
Hello, I am A.K. Sharma and I teach sociology in IIT Kanpur. I am trying to answer a simple question: how sociologists explain their facts. As you know that sociology was developed as a subject dealing with human behavior, but which would use the tools and techniques of science, mathematics, physics, chemistry. But this view that human behavior needs to be studied scientifically has been contradicted later on, and it was said that simply by relating one kind of facts with other kinds of facts, you cannot understand human behavior. To understand human behavior or to actually theorize about human behavior, you have to theorize the theories or motivations or meanings that people have in their mind in involving in a particular action. Now, using these two traditions, one tradition in which we relate one fact of society with other facts scientifically, and another tradition in which we try to develop second order constructs or theories that people have in their mind in acting in day to day life. They have produced two different traditions in sociology. One is called quantitative, another is called qualitative. Quantitative methodology uses scientific methods of conducting surveys, censuses, experiments, and then by using statistical methods, from simple method like arithmetic mean to sophisticated methods like logistic regression, we try to arrive at some inference. Qualitative tradition, qualitative methodology on the other hand uses ethnographic approach, and here the researcher attempts to become part of the community which he or she intends to study, because the assumption is that only by becoming part of the community, by living among the people whom you are studying, and by putting yourself in their shoes, by trying to understand things or their environment or their behavior or their culture or festivals or economic behavior or politics from their angle, from their perspective, how they feel, what understanding they carry in their mind, that only by understanding these things we can understand facts of society. Actually, in one of the latest works, World Bank, which uses a lot of statistics, has also talked about understanding mental models that people use in involving in behavior. Emile Durkheim long back said that sociology uses comparative method, and let me just give one example and then I will finish. Suppose I tell you that infant mortality rate in India is 40. What does it mean? It means nothing. But when you compare infant mortality of India today with Japan, and you find that Japan has 2 and India has 40, then you get disturbed. Then you start thinking, why is it that infant mortality in India is so high? And then you can also compare infant mortality of India with infant mortality of say Kenya or Mozambique or other countries, and you find that these countries have much higher infant mortality than India. And then you can create a hypothesis that perhaps economic development has something to do with infant mortality. Countries which are more developed, countries like Japan, they have low infant mortality. Countries like Mozambique or Kenya, which are less developed, have higher infant mortality. So, you have a connection. This is what sociology is about, connection between facts. So, by using census, surveys, by conducting field work, by using ethnographic methods, by using comparative methods, we arrive at sociological findings. Use of experimental method in sociology has been very less. but I learned that recently economists, which 10 years ago I could not see that economists will one day use experimental method, but today we find that economists are using lot of experimental methods to study human behavior. Now, this work may be done by economists, but the findings of their study can very well be called sociological studies. So, sociology tomorrow, I think that sociology tomorrow, in addition to using surveys and comparative methods, will also be using experimental methods. Thank you.